Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're enjoying the content on the channel. Please do subscribe and like the video if you do enjoy it. This week we've got something a little bit different. We like to do these from time to time, basically when we got the opportunity, and we've just had big opportunity to meet Roy Rodgers, one of the sculptors on Empire Strikes Back, and also notable artist, and has had an 18-year career in making movies. It's always a massive highlight to us when we get to meet the people who actually created the movies that we love so much. So we met Roy a couple of weeks ago and we chatted to him about his career and obviously about his work on The Empire Strikes Back.
I can tell you how I got into it, the film business, because I was teaching at the time in an art school, because I was trained as a painter. I wasn't trained as a sculptor, but I did a lot of sculpture for prop people outside, and I worked in a prop studio. So, and I'd always been quite good at sculpture. It's one of those things, you are, if you are, you are. Empire was the first really big movie. I'd never worked on a big production. I'd always worked on TV stuff and stuff like that, because we lived quite close to the old Thames television studios, and I knew a lot of people there anyway, because they were friends. And any work that could come my way quite often did. Sometimes it was two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional, but so that was my introduction into that world of and I also met a lot of people who'd worked in the film industry and had retired out of it and gone into television, for various reasons, and they were quite well known. They probably worked on a lot of major films, so that was quite interesting and useful. Somebody rang me up one day and said, they need a sculptor down at Elstree. They're looking for somebody who can do figurative sculpture. So, and at that time I needed it. I really did need it. And so I rushed to the phone box, because I even got a phone at the time, phoned up, and it turned out to be Norman Reynolds. And he said, oh, well, Roy, can you do a figure? Are you good at figuratives? I said, oh, yes, I can do that. And that's all that happened. He said, well, you can start on Monday morning. We start at 8:30 or 8 or whatever it was. And so I went along Monday morning, up the stairs to the side of the building, which was right at the top, was the original art department. It was top of a corrugated building, which is no longer there, and the prop store was underneath. And it was an odd experience, because something totally outside my experience, actually. And I hadn't met Norman before, and he turned out to be a really nice guy, and we got on ever so well. But he said to me, well, right, he said, and he talked about the medical robot. That was the first thing I did. And he said, well, and he got a cigarette packet out. He was scribbling on the back of it. And I thought, is that all it is? Surely there must be more to it than that. But that's how the ideas were sort of generated all the time. And I don't think I ever saw a proper drawing for it. And then he'd come in, I made a start, and he said, I want the head very skull-like. And he said, the body, and for some reason or other, he wanted that sort of bandagey sort of thing wrapped around it. And anyway, I was there doing it for about, I suppose, a month. And during that time, he used to come in, look at it and say, yeah, could you just, or what about that? But it was always a sort of very cooperative thing, it wasn't say, don't do that or do this. And it gradually developed. And then he sort of came in one day and he had the microphone, there's 35 microphones with a grill. And he said, try that, he said. And he slapped it on the front. And it was brilliant. It just worked, absolutely, and it's still there. That's what we used. And it was a sort of, it was a revelation to me, really, how that was all done. And when I worked much later in the film industry full time, which I wasn't at that time, I'd hardly ever worked without a drawing. It's just people produce drawings for things. Sometimes they didn't, but most of the time they did. So that was my sort of, and I met lots of really nice people, which was the great thing. And I remember I used to sit up in the art department because I didn't know anybody. And I'd say, well, I think I'll have my lunch, and went up the road, got a sandwich and got a bottle of wine or something, and came back, sat in the art department and started. And then somebody came in one day, an art director, and he said, where do you go for lunch? I said, well, I'll just go up the road and get a sandwich. He said, oh, you must be mad. He said, there's bars down there, you should come down there. And that was Michael Lamont. And he became very supportive and a good friend. But and the reason he said that was, he said, everybody who you want to know or see in the business, he said, they'll be in this film. He said, we'll be in the bar. He said, and, you know, that's where you should be. So I did, and that habit stayed with me right the way through my career, basically. But yeah, that's that. And I did meet lots of people. And I became, well, shortly, I just became very, very overawed by it, really. I thought I couldn't get enough of it. And so, for various reasons, I gave up my teaching post. I was a senior lecturer. And I thought, I said to my wife at the time, I said, I think I'm going to give this up because I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life, you know, for various reasons, although I like the students. And she said, well, do it then if you can. And various people at that time, because I was always in and out, they say, well, why don't you just come and work here, for God's sake, you know, do it. So I did. And it was a bit of a step in the dark, but it worked. And I made loads of friends, and, you know, the people were always very helpful. No, not always, some of them weren't, but a lot of the time they were. And I made friends who, unfortunately, are no longer with us, but and that sort of got me going in the industry, and I did it for 18 years.
When you got the call, did you know that you were going into the sequel of Star Wars, and were you familiar with Star Wars?
I was familiar with Star Wars because everybody was at that time. I mean, I remember the first one that came out, and I knew I knew one or two people who worked on the first one. I had nothing to do with it, but I just knew who they were. And one of the people that worked on it was a chap called Tony Freeman, who was a sculptor, and he was a good friend of mine. Also was familiar with the fact it suddenly became really big. I think bigger than anybody thought it ever would be. And of course the second one sort of rode back on the back of that. But so yeah, by that time I knew how big this was. You know, it was a major thing to be involved with. The brief was, I was making the medical robot, and the sculptor was Jan Stevens. Jan was there when I got there, and she was quite a favourite, I think, of Norman's anyway, and she'd done quite a lot of big movies, and he'd asked her to do this hand for the what's it, RTT2, or the golden guy. What's it?
C-3PO.
Yes, and what happened after the first film, nobody ever thought it was going to be what it became, but so they kept some of the stuff, and we had a big store in Borehamwood where they shoved it all in, and a lot of it was made just for the film, you know, and somebody thrown this. Anyway, he came in one day into the room to her, and he said, Jan, I want this, and he had this pile of bits and pieces in his hand, and he said, it's the hands of this particular robot thing. So I said, so she said, well, okay, fine. He says, you'll need to get your hand cast, because you model it on, we want it, this was like a glove, but he said, we want it like modelled on a hand, so that in fact, you know, it can then be cast and made into a piece. And it was all little bumps and lumps and things. And so she said, all right. So I remember at the lunchtime, she said to me, I'm going downstairs. So the plaster shop was underneath us at the time. And Harry Gomez was the guy down there in charge. And she said, I've come down to have my hand cast and she told him what it was for. And it was no big deal. I mean, it was something that happened quite often, those sort of things. Can you cast this? Can you cast that? Can you cast my foot? Or whatever. And she didn't come back for ages. In fact, she didn't come back at all until about 5 o'clock. And by that time, her arm was in a sling, and she looked dreadful. And she went home, and what had happened was the guy had cast it into plaster, and she had a wedding ring on, and plaster heats up, as you know, I'm sure, when it's, you know, warming up and curing, and they couldn't get her hand out. And they couldn't get that hand out because the ring was so tight, her hand swelled up. Anyway, they had to break it open. But as a result, she lost her finger. I think eventually she got gangrene and they had to cut it. So that was a disaster.
Wow, so she actually lost her finger.
She did, yeah. And Norman felt terribly embarrassed about it.
Did she go back to sculpting?
Yes, she
later?
did. Yes, she did. But she lost her wedding ring finger, and she never let him forget it. So she was always first in line for a film or whatever it is. I mean, that's not fair, really. But yeah, I mean, he did feel very responsible actually for it, and he didn't have to be because it wasn't him that did it. You know, it was she was working on his film, so I suppose he felt that no. And Norman came up to me on the second day. He knew she wasn't coming back. He said, and she'd been working on all these little concept models, and he said, Roy, you're going to have to do those. So I said, oh, really? Good. And so he, you know, he came in. It's again like working on the big one. The first one didn't have a concept model. I don't think they just did it. So I spent quite a lot of time making, you know, 18-inch figures, and he'd come in and say, well, no, not that one, and they'd do another one. So it sort of it gradually developed just by doing it until we got to a point where we could work on the big one. But yeah, again, that's how it went. There wasn't a drawing. It was just all in Norman's head, basically, which I thought was amazing that he could actually do that. But you know.
Okay, so you talked about the microphone being pushed in.
And that, yeah.
Is this a similar thing with the little circles that have been applied on the?
Yeah, sometimes you'd come in and the thing was clay, and after lunch you'd come in and you'd find something stuck into it, and I thought, hello, somebody's been in, and I left it there thinking, well, you know, are they being funny or what? And it wasn't. It was Norman, or maybe one of the art directors, Norman Lamont or somebody like that, would come in, just try that, see what it looks like. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you just take it off. And so it was all a bit, you know, try it, and if it works, leave it. Yeah.
So from our point of view now, it's really interesting looking at the sculpt and the changes that have happened between going from the sculpt to what we see on screen. And I'm guessing there's various reasons for that, just the practicalities of of the way it's made, and then maybe last minute changes where
things were changed. Even when they'd been finished, they were changed, you know. I mean, they'd all been precast or whatever, and then you'd see it and you think, I don't remember doing that bit, or it wasn't like that last time I saw it, you know, because special effects and people like that, if they're doing stuff to it, they've got to make it work for them as well. So it might well get changed, or somebody might just come in and look at it and go, not really, I think we should do this, or take that off. So there was always, even right to the end, even when it was in its almost finished state, people were constantly sort of looking at it and changing it. And that's another side of the industry I thought was amazing, because nothing was ever good enough. You know, it was nobody said, oh, that'll do. Well, if they did, they didn't last long. But I mean, you know, that sort of feeling of push it to as far as you possibly can and get it right. And even when they were doing sort of things, sometimes they'd come in and say, can you make a thing for their model? And it would be a space, you know, a bit of space stuff. And they wanted it for their model. Can you do that and knock it out for us? And I said, okay. But it all had to be right. You know, all the lines, it had to look as though it could work, basically. I think that was the thing. And again, I did quite a lot of that, because I was actually quite good at that. They quite liked it. I remember Michael came in one day and he asked me to do this thing, and I did it for him. I knocked it out through it. And he said, wait, that's brilliant. And he rushed next door to show somebody else. I said, it's only a bit of plasticine. You know, it's what it is. But I don't know what they'd been used to before, but, you know, it was, yeah. But they were dedicated, absolutely dedicated people. And you have to be. You know, you can't just go in and do the job and go home and forget about it. It's sort of part of your life, which was rather good.
Can you tell us what pieces you did for ESB, or what pieces can you remember doing for ESB?
For this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did some stuff on the body. I did partly the head, and the body bit, when I sculpted it, was, I remember, again, Norman came in and he said, have you ever thought of putting something that looks like the front of a lorry on the front? In other words, the radiator, great chunky thing, you know. He didn't want that on there, but he tried to get me to sort of see what he was talking about. And so we did, we tried it. I'm not sure that it stayed there, actually, but so there was that. And then just working around this and trying to finish it and make it what it became. It's very still, and I actually hadn't seen a lot of the other stuff that was been done, you know, the stuff that's done on the previous film that Brian did. So I had photographs and pictures, but so you had to keep, you know, it's no point in doing what's been done already, but it was nice that there was a sort of continuity in a way, because the type of helmet that it is like all these here, you know, it's got that sort of look, which I suppose is, you know, it makes us a signature piece, really, you know.
So that the cowl and the dome on the helmet then, was that something that was drawn on the back of the fag packet, or is that something...
well talked about, yes, yeah. Oh yes, it was, yeah, sure.
Okay, so you did the kind of the snow trooper sculpture and the medical droid. Did you do any other work on ESB?
They suddenly wanted a full-size Yoda head. Nobody thought about it, and there was this guy coming in, and he was going to wear it, and because they had a real Yoda, and so they brought the Yoda in, and somebody, I can't remember who it wasn't Norman, but said, "Can you make this that big?" You know, and he gave me the sizes and all that stuff, and he said, "We want it quickly," because they had to mould it and cast it out and do whatever it is they did, and I did. Yes, I did that. So that was it. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
So, yeah. So you scaled up the
figure.
The puppet head.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it set me off on the path. Well, I did the Tomb Raider movies, both of them, and on that I did a full-size Buddha, which he climbs up and takes something off the top of his head, and that took quite a long time. And there are other bits and pieces I did. I made a small Buddha, which they used, which was actually like a maquette for the big one, really. I scaled that up, but they used that actually as well. And various other bits and pieces. And the second one, I did an 18-foot high figure of Alexander the Great, sitting in his chair. And again, she climbs up that, and it was really 18 foot high. Yeah. Oh, and Harry Potter, I did three Harry Potters. Yeah, not the first one I didn't do. The second one I did, third one, fourth one, at Leavesden, and they were good. Yeah, I did all sorts of stuff on those, big stuff, small stuff, and you know, it's all, you never quite know what you're going to get asked to do. It's just one of those things. But there were always drawings for that. That was Stuart Craig was the designer on that, and he was quite precise. But okay, you know, he didn't give you a bad time or anything. Oh, Labyrinth, yeah, the Bowie figure, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, I worked on Labyrinth, and they wanted I can't remember who the set dresser was, but anyway, he wanted a little figure of, it was not of Bowie, but it was meant to be Bowie. It was on her dressing table, and I made it in bronze, looked like bronze, and it was a bronze thing, which eventually they changed, they cast it, and they didn't make it bronze, they actually made it and then painted it like a ceramic. So it was painted up, and they took it off the base and it changed it, but it was still the same figure. And it was the thing that made her think about Bowie, and that's Bowie character in that was based on that figurine thing. So there was that, and there were other things as well, but yeah, I've still got that actually. Yeah. Oh yes, I did with Norman Reynolds. I did the third Alien, which was extraordinarily difficult, because he phoned me up and he said, I would like you to come and work on my film. So I said, of course I will, And it was the summer, and I went down there, and it was at Shepperton, I think. I can't remember if it was Shepperton or might have been Pinewood. And I think it was Pinewood, actually. And there was another film going on at the same time, Robin Hood. And anyway, I said, okay, Norman, what am I doing? He said, well, not quite sure yet, he said, but the original concept for the film was going to be that it was a planet totally made of wood. You know, everything was wood, and which would have been great. I mean, and he said, no, just think of that. He said, you've got to be in charge of this, and you've got to get all the right people to work with you, and so on. So I thought, well, this is going to be okay. So then suddenly the director, who I can't remember who it was, went. He just wasn't there one day. He just wasn't there. So he went. So then they got another director. And I think they went about 3 directors, and that meant that Norman was going backwards and forwards to America all the time. And eventually we got the director, young guy, and I think it was his first major film actually, and now he's huge. And I can't remember his name, isn't that awful? But he did it.
I'm trying to think.
He got it on.
Dante? No.
No, was it Fincher or was it?
Yes, no, it's Fincher.
Fincher.
And he got it. Apparently, he got it on the back of the Madonna videos he did, which were amazing. And you could see it in the film. He always took low shots, and there was a lot of that in the film. Anyway, he was really nice, and he came in and he came around one day, and I was doing something, doing a poly thing and Norman brought him in to meet me and meet everybody, and I started to tell him about the job, and he said, "How do you do that?" You know, I said, "Well, you do," and he said, "Well, how do you get that? And how is it?" And Norman said, "Oh, just tell him," you know. So I had to tell him, you know, and he was really interested in the technical side of it, you know, how you get a bit of poly so smooth, you know, which we take for granted, or how you cut it to certain shapes and so on. And so he was okay, and because he went on to do very well. Oh, and the other, well, just to finish on that thing, because the film, the alien thing went on for so long, they changed the whole concept. So instead of actually being made of wood, it wasn't made of wood anymore. It was actually made of concrete, which was a major change. And I know Norman wasn't that happy about it, because it would have been fabulous if he'd done it his way. But by that time, I think they were getting a bit, whoever is involved with all this, you know, that had to be done. And it turned out there wasn't really that much for me to do. I know, but I know he deliberately found things for me to do. You know, he sort of said one day they had shuttering. It was all concrete shuttering, which was a major change, and there was a religious cult in the movie. If you've seen it, you'll know that. And he said, "Can you go around and scratch a few things in the wall? You know, make a few drawings, or you know, just scratch it in." And so I did that for a bit, and then he asked me to do these things, shapes which he was going to put round. So there was all sorts of stuff until in the end we called it a day, and that was it. But so it was a shame really, because it could have been much better than it was. Prometheus was my last film, and it was getting to the point where I just thought this is going to be my last film. I wasn't sure if another one had come along. I suppose immediately I might have done it, but it was on that film. I was on it for the whole film, and I did the big head with one or two people to help me. But it was getting to the point where I thought, and there were loads of young people suddenly flooding the set, you know, and some of them were very good. I mean, I'm not saying that they weren't, because they were. And I thought, Roy, I think your time's coming to a close here, because all these people, they're young, they're hungry for it, and they've got the talent, and it's time really to step back, which is exactly what I did. And one of the reasons I stepped back was on my last day, I was going out, I had variacs, which we used to cut the poly with, and they're quite heavy, and it was on the trolley, and you're wheeling all your stuff out to the car and all that stuff. Every film is the same. And as I was going out, I went to lift it up to get it through the door, and this very nice young boy ran over to me. He said, "Oh, it's all right, Roy, don't you lift it." And I thought, oh no, the game's up, you know, don't. And I felt like turning around and saying, "Leave me alone." But but I thought, no, it sort of reminded me really, and I thought, it's time for you to go. So that was it. That was the last thing I did. And actually, although I regretted it, not doing it at the time, I mean, when I stopped working and getting up at 6 in the morning and going out to a workplace which I knew and loved, and it was always different. That was the other thing. Sometimes, it wasn't always comfortable. It was good, and I thought, well, I think I'm not going to do this anymore. And when I didn't do it, I missed it. I was excited by the whole process, and just doing it. A lot of people I met in the industry or on the outside who were in various sort of departments, not in the art department, but they sort of went, and they were sort of quite casual about it, and well, it's only films, don't worry about it. But to me, it wasn't that. It was much more than that. It was, I just went along with the romance of it, seeing film stars walking about and all that. bit sad, isn't it, really? But I did. And yeah, to be involved with that and to meet people like that, I thought was terrific. But I also enjoyed meeting the people who did it. You know, all the art people and the special effects people, and so you got to know them really well. And you work from film to film, sometimes with the same people, or you'd go on to another film where you didn't meet anybody that you knew, to start with, because each film was different people. You know, I missed it enormously. I mean, I sort of missed the people. I missed the sort of way that jobs were done, and the involvement that everybody had in a project, and very, very clever people you were coming across all the time, who you wouldn't normally in the course of work do, and the banter, which went without saying, really. So I did miss all that, and also the status. I miss the status of being a sculptor in the industry, which, you know, there is a status to it if you've done as much as I have, and I miss that. But you know, it's gone. So I then went back to what I was trained to do, and I had always done actually. Even when I was working, I still did it when I was off or whatever, to painting, because that's what what I do. So now I spend all my time painting.
So there we go. That was our afternoon with Roy Rodgers. It's always so special, and it was such a pleasure for us to meet Roy. I would like to thank Brian and Lindsay, who were so hospitable, inviting us to their home. So I hope you didn't disappoint and that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like the video and do consider subscribing to the channel. We've got more content like this and more content showing how we make original trilogy lineage props. I think that's about it for this week. What can I say? Very proud, and I hope you enjoyed it.